Trade is a money printer, and a big part of this money printing journey is the trade steering element of it. As trade travels upstream, its value increases. By a very small 5%, but it adds up over the course of many trade nodes, especially if you build around trade steering, which people frequently do. So what happens when we simplify the world into one massive trade node? Will the game even run? Will it even load in? What happens when you implement this lemon mod level innovation? Right, before we get into it, usual things need to be gotten out of the way. A like on the video would be appreciated, and a subscription would be amazing. We are sitting at 21,000 subs right now, which is insane, and thank you very much for that. But our new mortal enemy, T-Rex, is sitting at 22,000. So it's not looking good for that 25k sub race. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing, so we can get ahead and win. Anyway, enough distractions, one single trade node time. So here we are in the world. Now, to be clear, I did not need to name this the English channel, I just thought it would be funny to do so. And yeah, this is if people ask what people speak in my Discord, then the answer is this. Okay, the joke worked a lot better in my head. Shut up. Anyway, basically this involved taking every single province in the world and shoving it into the English channel file on the trade nodes and deleting every other trade node, so there won't be any conflicts of multiple trade nodes. The other thing to also immediately bear in mind is I did not move the actual location of the English channel. I kept in the coast of Holland. These locations aren't automatically generated. You can define where they are. So, for example, the English channel is defined in the coast of Holland, sure. But there's nothing stopping me defining the English channel to sit on this random province in Greenland or something, right? So, basically, there is a version of this, which would be even funnier, that I can just shove the English channel trade node into somewhere like here. So, like the South Pacific Roaring 40s. So, no one ever can send a merchant there for absolute ages, because it'll be outside of everyone's trade range for forever. But for now, if you are in Europe, you still have the advantage of being able to send your merchants into the English channel, assuming that you know where the English channel is. I have loaded in with England here, but I have used the Terra Incognita console command, as you can see, to, well, take a look at the world here. So this is what normally people would see, but yeah, I've revealed the world to be clear. And with that said, yeah, this is the size of the world economy in terms of trade, 338 ducats, of which England owns 1%. So with that said, let's reveal what share of the global economy everyone has, and to the surprise of absolutely no one, the Ming dominates with more than twice the amount of trade power as the next person, England. See, everyone has +5 trade power for just having their main trade city be in the area, which is already quite decent. The thing is, Ming just dominates with the amount of provinces and the amount of trade centers they have. But I think it's interesting to take a look at what happens to all the other nations. England is in second. After all, they do have at least a merchant there, and a lot of very highly developed provinces with a decent chunk of trade centers in the area. Caen, Calais, all of this is all contributing to basically their dominance of the English Channel, because they have a lot of development in here, and now of these areas, even Kent is 12 development, and Essex is 14. York is at 8, so even a lot of their lower dev areas are quite well developed. Even at game start, 9 development is nothing to be scoffed at, which is contributing quite a lot of trade power to this area, as well as of course all of their trade nodes, because they have a lot of trade centers here, 6 to be more specific, as well as of course 2 estuaries, which really helps them. And this is why they, without any trade ships or anything, are actually in the second position for this competition, as it were. However, what's interesting is actually the third place is Genoa, and that's not what I expected. But the thing to bear in mind is they do have that Italian merchant influence in the Genoese colony in Galatia, which would be giving them trade power in Byzantium, which we'll get to, right? Because they have this, they have the modifier for the Byzantine Genoese colony Galatia, right? Because Genoa has this colony, they're getting trade power in, well, the English Channel, and this is really massively helping them and boosting them up to third with that flat 20. Also, the land they do own, well, they do have a massive centre of trade, a world port, on a 25 development province. So this on its own is a massive, well, trade power printer, which is why they are so high up on this list, namely third when they really shouldn't be. The person in fourth, though, is one that surprised me a lot as well, but it's actually Bengal, and once you actually look at it, it kind of makes sense. Bengal is a trade monster. If you haven't played them, you should definitely give them a go. And I mean, I know way too much about Bengal, frankly, because one of my close friends really enjoys Bengal gaming. But with that said, Bengal is an absolute economic monster, starting with a world port, one of 13 dev provinces, and also having, much like the England situation, a lot of highly dev provinces, and a whole bunch of estuaries. 2 to be exact, with 4 more centres of trade that aren't a level 3 world port. Which is why it's not that surprising that without even knowing where the English Channel is, Bengal is already coming in a very respectable 4th in the world. Then you see the usual suspects, Vijayanagar, Castile Ottomans. These are big countries with a lot of trade centres and a lot of, well, development. Ottomans are more focusing on development. because they don't have that many trade centers, but 3 is nothing to be scoffed at, and Castile just having a combination of both development and loads of trade centers to dominate it. Vijayanagar, of course, also possesses this beautiful, beautiful coastline, as well as these estuaries up there to just print trade power, as well as just their possessions on this coastline as well. Like, they are actually trade monsters. Frankly, I'm surprised they're not higher, considering they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 natural harbours and entry ports, as well as 2 estuaries. Oh, right, they don't. That's Andhra. I'm just so used to Andhra and Vijayanagar becoming like one, like 3 seconds in. That makes a lot more sense. If they had these 2, they definitely would be much higher on the list. My apologies. See, I normally invade India. I normally don't play in India. That's my cope. Finally, after the Ottomans, you see things like Venice, Mamluks, and France, and then you actually see Novgorod, which I guess makes sense given their trade dominance in the area. But frankly, I was expecting to see Muscovy above Novgorod. Just goes to show how much Novgorod actually was dominant in the trade wars. And then there's Aragon, followed by Lithuania. Remarkably, Lithuania comes out on top of Poland, and I thought Poland would have a decent chance given they have a lot of good development, but I guess they just don't turn up for a while. But yeah, this is the list. I'm going to keep going down it. If people are interested, you could just pause and look around. There's some surprise entries into here. I mean, Austria never expect to be that much of a trade power, but it's surprisingly high on the list. And then you just kind of keep going. At the bottom of the list, we're going to find the classics. So random OPMs that have debuffs that are transferring trade power to things like Lübeck. Random OPMs as well, like Dahomey and all those things. And somewhere around, because they actually have debuffs to their trade because they're transferring trade power. And somewhere near the middle, you're going to start, well, the bottom middle, you're going to start fighting Native American tribes. Now, the other question I think is important to ask is, does this actually work? Does the game let you just have one massive trade node? And the answer, remarkably enough, let me just put the speed up for this demonstration is, I should probably tag out of England so that I let the AI do things. But yeah, the game does not mind having this. I'm going to up the speed a bit as well, so just we can see some more things going. And yeah, this is fine. The game can run with this setting. Although, one thing to bear in mind as well, and I said bear in mind like 5 times, is the fluctuations of the value of this trade node are insane. Because a Native American migrating has a huge, has like an observed impact on this node. I won't say huge, but them going from like a good which is worth 4 ducats to a good that's worth 2 ducats is immediately reflected in the value of the English channel, and so on and so forth. Also, any events that scale to any channel are going to be immediately popping into here. So, for example, any absent merchants by Clemensen or allowed imports by Lübeck are all going to be reflected in this list. So if we just wait, this is going to fill up concerningly quickly. I say as it's not filling up. Okay, this is weird. In my testing, it filled up quite quickly and was kind of funny to watch because there'll be like 50 of those pop-ups. But yeah. Wow, the moment I record, it doesn't do it for me. But in essence, yeah, every single time you get an event that affects trade power in your node, it's going to be affecting in the English channel, which I think is hilarious. The other thing to bear in mind is, of course, some nations and missions have things that scale with those things, and I'm going to pop into Byzantium now, before they get annexed. And we're going to see a very interesting decision available to them. They have the option to integrate Galatia, but that normally requires having 50% of the trade in Constantinople. Turns out Paradox is actually quite smart and scoped all of those things to the trade node they're inside. So for Constantinople to integrate Galatia, they need to have 50% trade power in the English Channel, which is not something they're going to be doing. They also need the province of Constantinople itself to become the highest valued trade province in the English Channel, which again, good luck. But I find that quite amusing that they still actually have the option to integrate Galatia if they can get 50% in the English Channel. Quite a big ask, but, you know, doable. And so do a lot of other missions like that. Basically, the Hanseatic League and so on and so forth are going to involve fighting over the English Channel. The world is so orange, it's cursed. Now let's also discuss some other side effects. You need one merchant to collect in your home node. Every other merchant you gain throughout the entire campaign is entirely pointless. In fact, your starting merchant, one of them, is going to have nothing to do for the rest of the game. That is it. No trade and messing around. This is, frankly, the perfect game for Playmaker. Automatically, if you're collecting the English Channel, you're doing the optimal kind of gaming. So it's kind of interesting in that way. The other thing to bear in mind is things that give caravan buffs, so things in inland nodes, are also entirely useless, because this is not an inland node. So there is no node that caravan buffs can apply to, as well as inland trade buffs. For example, merchants gaining plus 50% trade power in inland nodes. Yeah, no. So the poor monument over here in this province that gives caravan power, that's useless, right? That 33% caravan power does nothing. I mean, the global trade power is nice, but the caravan power, completely pointless. As are debuffs to, well, trade power abroad. See, things like Byzantium are going to be inside the English Channel, meaning that if they get overextension, say by reclaiming their rightful property, so they have a bit of overextension. The trade power abroad of minus 204%, it does absolutely nothing. Which someone brings us into the next stages. If you're Muslim and you manage to get 50% of this area, you could propagate religion, which is kind of hilarious on the entire world. But more importantly, improving that nodes suddenly gives you siegeability and artillery level available versus forts on the entire planet, which is stupidly broken. Now, of course, this also requires you to get a whole bunch of trade power in the area, unless you get the government reform that enables this for free. Now, the student did a video on this a while back, and I believe it's one of the economic policies. I believe in free trade, there we go, where the trade policy improving that round no longer requires trade power to be used. So this thing's actually a very strong thing to pick up. But the other options, of course, include global, well, this is actually quite funny to look at, but global improved relations and things like that. And yeah, it's kind of hilarious in that sense that you can get all of these buffs on the entire world. And yeah, of course, the production increase from trade companies is going to be interesting because it's going to affect the entire world, as would be things from trade league cities and things like that. They do seem a bit broken at the moment, so that could just be a paradox moment not handling everything going on at the moment. Now, one final thing that I think will make almost for a cool campaign with this setting is, yes, the entire world is poorer, and we'll get into that in a bit, but I think it'll be quite interesting in the sense that you can privateer the entire world. So there's no need to go find the most highest value trade node. If you do want to do a privateering campaign, you can privateer literally the entire world, from random Native American tribes to random Australian Native American tribes to the Uzbeks, by just privateering the English Channel. There you go. It's one trade node to privateer, and you'll have that trade power for privateering. You'd also be privateering yourself, of course, but you know who's really asking questions at that point, which can be quite funny. The other thing to bear in mind, though, with that play is that every single AI will be pissed off at you universally, and every single AI will send out their ships to protect trade, meaning that you're probably going to struggle to actually privateer. It'll be quite funny, but that's about it. But with that said, let's talk about the final thing I want to talk about today. Is the world better off or worse off? And the answer is, almost universally, every nation is significantly poorer. I've gone through quite a few of these, checking if anyone's really made profit, and while I could technically make some kind of program that will check the incomes of nations with normal trade setups versus nations with not normal trade setups, the honest answer is that for countries that were on end nodes, on starting nodes, like in Australia, what's happened with them is that before they used to be competing with each other for the 3 ducats of trade power that they would be fighting over. So yes, they'll be fighting over 3 ducats, but at least they'll be able to get half a ducat out of it. Now, they can't compete with the massive trade power of the Europeans or other big trade nations, meaning that they make exactly zero money. So they are significantly worse off. Countries in the middle that will be able to sit in the middle of trade going through them obviously are not doing it anymore, so they're also poorer. And the end tag countries that technically now have access to all of the world's trade with all of their money and should be significantly richer are actually not, because they are again competing with all of themselves at the same time, and there's no trade steering to inflate the pot. Basically, the entire world is significantly worse off by removing the trade nodes. So yeah, this is a way of making the global economy poorer, making one whole trade node. I guess it's pretty much the same as removing trade steering in that sense, but it kind of, at least with trade steering, countries that were on the peripheries that wouldn't be benefiting from it would technically be relatively better off. They wouldn't be richer, but everyone else would be poorer. Now here, everyone is just poorer. So yeah, this is a bad idea. It's funny, and I think makes for an amusing what-if scenario. But yeah, the other thing to bear in mind, I'm actually quite impressed with how Paradox managed to handle everything. I mean, that's the Phoenix Rise event. I thought I was an observer. You know what? I'm just gonna leave Byzantium with all of that Ottoman land there on Cord. I'll let them deal with it. I'm sure they'll be fine. Oh look, they've even released some nations. Sure, they'll be doing great. Either way, yeah, you get to see the state of the world economy in real time though by taking a look at this trade node. And this is obviously also just really bad for things like spawning institutions, because that's just not really going to be happening. And yeah, maximize a bit of hostile trading. Yeah, this is somewhat amusing, but there we go. Yeah, institutions are kind of messed up here, so you kind of need to conquer half the world at least to be able to spawn global trade. Frankly, it's an interesting proposition. And yeah, look, the world economy every month updates very visibly. There's some natives move around, or some problems get occupied, or buildings getting built. Just drops by a ducat sometimes here or there. Quite an interesting concept. But there you go. I hope you found this concept fascinating as much as I did. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye.